happening tonight in Vancouver.
I'm grieving over every child that is unburied.
A new investigation begins into the deaths of children at a former residential school site in North Vancouver. Just ahead, finding answers about the kids that never made it home.
I think we've got thick skin right now. It's in survival mode.
I thought they would have learned that they can't do to small businesses, independent businesses on Broadway what they did to us.
Broadway subway construction isn't just tearing into the ground, it's actually tearing into the bottom lines of some local businesses. What they're doing to try to stay afloat.
Crews are working 14-hour days and 14 days in a row in really tough conditions.
BC is on the cusp of a third heat wave, and with wildfires burning across our province, crews are bracing for a very difficult battle ahead. We have the latest from the BC Wildfire Service, as well as a stern warning for tourists and those flying drones in impacted areas.
This is City News everywhere.
My dad went to St. Paul's Indian Residential School. You know, I'm grateful he survived. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today.
Public records show that a dozen unidentified students died while attending the former St. Paul's Indian Residential School in North Vancouver from 1904 to 1913. The Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations say that over 2,000 children, representing 6 generations from a number of different Indigenous communities, attended St. Paul's. Now, an Indigenous-led investigation is seeking answers about the children that never made it home from this place.
Our intention here today is to begin a healing process for our survivors and for our people, for the survivors who attended the St. Paul's Indian Residential School, but also the intergenerational survivors who live with and have felt the effects of the residential school system.
Many of the students that attended St. Paul's were from the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations.
The 3 nations will be working together with the Catholic Archdiocese to gather all information, all records, to investigate the children who had attended the school.
The 3 nations made the investigation announcement Monday at St. Thomas Aquinas Regional Secondary School, the high school that is built on the original site of the St. Paul's Indian Residential School, which operated from 1899 to 1958.
I'm grieving over every child that is unburied. Every child, I feel it right down to my bones.
Ganarji O'Sullivan of the Tlawitsis people went to St. Michael's Residential School in Alert Bay, British Columbia.
I really believe that these schools, they should be contacting us to make sure, for one thing, that we're okay and that we're alive, and to try and invite us there to witness these investigations, I think, is really crucial.
Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations say many of the children at St. Paul's were forcibly relocated to the Kamloops Indian Residential School, where the remains of at least 215 children were discovered in May. Since then, hundreds of more graves have been found at residential school sites across Canada.
This work is really sacred and really important to our people. And first and foremost, this work is about protecting and helping our survivors.
Emotional support for those affected by the residential school system can call the Indian Residential School Survivors Society toll-free at 1-800-721-0066. In North Vancouver, Keir Junos, City News.
We're announcing an additional $83 million in funding through CERNAC to support more Indigenous communities in this extremely difficult and necessary work.
Canada ponies up millions to help First Nations communities looking for unmarked graves associated with the Indian residential school system. Combined with existing funding commitments, Ottawa has put aside $321 million to help look for graves and help First Nations determine what to do with remaining residential school buildings.
Whether those plans include demolition, rehabilitation, or the construction of new facilities on reserve so that activities currently taking place in these buildings can continue. Canada, to that end, will provide $100.1 million over 2 years to support this work.
But Ottawa stopped short of introducing a special prosecutor to investigate residential schools. Instead, it's appointing a special interlocutor who would be a go-between for governments and First Nations.
They will identify needed measures and recommend a new legal framework that respects the dignity of burial sites and Indigenous children, in line with the wishes and traditions of communities and families.
This is short of what some have asked for. A prosecutor with the power to lay criminal charges. But National Chief Roseanne Archibald says it's an important first step.
I have absolute faith that not only are these ministers committed to healing and the journey forward, but that the majority, the clear majority of Canadians are also committed to the healing journey with us. And we're going to walk that journey, and it will always be something that we can look back at in history and say that we did this together.
Anishinaabe Professor Veldon Coburn is taking the news with a grain of salt. He points out new spending needs to pass through the House of Commons, giving this the feel of an election promise. And he says communities have had trouble accessing funding that's already available.
First Nations may not have the capacity to be eligible for those expenditures. So it sounds good on paper and in photo ops, but oftentimes, and not terribly often, but enough that it really doesn't actually get to the people who need it and the stakeholders.
Now, it's not just cash for First Nations. Ottawa is also putting aside $20 million for a memorial here in Ottawa on unceded Algonquin territory to honor survivors and those children who never made it home. In Ottawa, Xiaoli Li, City News.
Canada condemns this verdict on all possible terms.
A death sentence for a Canadian upheld by a court in China. Why Canada's top diplomat in Beijing says the timing of the decision is no coincidence.
Well, hundreds of new COVID cases have been diagnosed in BC. Over the past day, we have 395 new infections. However, there are no new deaths. For the first time in a long time, case numbers in the Interior Health Region make up less than half of the new cases. Hospitalization numbers are on the rise again. 73 people are in hospital. Of those, 23 patients are in intensive care. More than 72% of people in this province are fully vaccinated.
Has it impacted business?
Yeah, it definitely has. It has impacted the sales. The only thing is, I think if it was a regular year with COVID, it would show up a little bit more dramatic and we'd be more focused on how much it is impacting us. But because of COVID and with all the restrictions and everything else, that it's just another thing that we have to deal with as a small business.
This is what Ron McGilvray and his customers at Fable Diner see and hear each day as work continues on the Broadway subway line in Vancouver. Construction workers have been tearing up the street using heavy machinery outside his main and Broadway restaurant for about 6 months. The chronic grinding of the machines makes it hard to have a conversation.
There's a few guests that kind of leave because it's a little bit too noisy. Some people call, they don't know if we're open or not. And they see it, and it's really tough to find parking around here. I mean, it's tough anyway, but now it's almost impossible to find parking kind of close to this area.
The extension is set to open by 2025, so with all the work being done, has any immediate help from the province or the city been offered?
I haven't reached out, no one's reached out to me or this business for it. You know, we'll see how long it goes and what's, you know, how it is impacting us down the road, but it's definitely affecting a lot of the businesses around here.
It's not the first time transportation-related construction has impacted Vancouver traffic. One man we've spoken to says he was there for a similar situation from 2005 to 2009 while the Canada Line was being built. And for him, this is simply a case of deja vu.
I thought they would have learned that they can't do to small businesses, independent businesses on Broadway what they did to us.
Leonard Schein, who ran the Park Theatre on Cambie, says they're still going through the courts as the province appeals a judgment that found he and other businesses were entitled to compensation because of construction-related disruptions.
They appealed it, and we're waiting for another court case, and everything's been delayed because of COVID, so nobody's received a penny yet in compensation.
When City News reached out regarding support, the City of Vancouver said it was investing in an I Love Broadway campaign to let people know shops are open. The city says there is also a bike parking program so people can bike to the area and shop on weekends. Regardless, McGilvray hopes those responsible for the project will do the right thing.
The easiest thing is money, like monetary, you know, to help out. Other than that, because, you know, with that, then we want to keep all our staff. It's tough to find staff, so we want to hold on to who we have and make sure we have enough staff.
In Vancouver, Ria Renouf, City News.
We're headed into another period of hot and dry weather in southern British Columbia, and this will mean more fire activity in an already incredibly tough season.
This past weekend brought in some much needed rain here in BC, but things are about to dry up as another heat wave is expected to hit the province later this week, which is devastating news for those fighting approximately 260 active wildfires throughout the province. The message for Metro Vancouverites: stay close to home to keep hotel spaces free for those needing to flee.
It's an exceptionally challenging time for many British Columbians.
Starting Thursday and moving into the weekend, temperatures could hit the high 20s to low to mid 30s in some parts of the province. Officials say fire crews are working 14 hours a day, 14 days in a row to battle wildfires across BC.
150,000 hectares have burned so far in unprecedented heat. There's severe drought and persistent winds. In the hardest hit areas of the province, there has been thousands of lightning strikes with very little rainfall. Thousands of people have been evacuated, and thousands more have been on evacuation alert.
The province says all resources are being used to fight wildfires that have devastated small communities. This comes after residents of Monty Lake accused the BC Wildfire Service of failing to better protect properties from the White Rock Lake wildfire last week.
The fire service was simultaneously responding to many significant fires posing threat to homes and infrastructure around the province at that time. And we have continued to resource this fire since the date of discovery. We just really want to recommend people respect the orders and the alerts and the direction that is provided by the local officials on these fires.
The BC Wildfire Service also warning Tuesday about drones getting in the way of firefighting aircrafts in the last few days. Meanwhile, people in the Lower Mainland are being asked to avoid booking up hotels in the southern interior to allow for evacuees who have lost their homes and have nowhere else to go.
We want to reinforce creating a plan so that you can stay with friends and family if you're evacuated. And this is important for a number of reasons. The primary one is this allows hotel space or certain spaces to be freed up for those that don't have options to stay with family and friends.
In New Westminster, Ashley Burr, City News.
2018年11月20日
A Chinese court upholding a death sentence for Canadian Robert Schellenberg, rejecting his appeal.
We just heard the verdict.
Canada's ambassador to China speaking outside the Chinese court Tuesday.
Canada condemns this verdict on all possible terms.
And he told reporters, as quoted by the Globe and Mail, it's no coincidence. This is happening right now during the ongoing extradition hearing in Vancouver involving Chinese telecoms giant Huawei exec Meng Wanzhou. Initially, Schellenberg was sentenced to 15 years in jail for drug smuggling. But that changed in 2019, a month after Meng was arrested at a BC airport on a U.S. warrant over charges linked to violating sanctions. She's denied wrongdoing and is fighting extradition. And just days after Meng's arrest in December 2018, two Canadians, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, were detained in China, where they've been held for more than 2 years, charged with spying, in a move widely seen as retribution for Meng's arrest. At the time, China warned of unspecified consequences unless Meng was released. But China also denies the cases are connected. Spavor is expected to be sentenced Wednesday. Back to Schellenberg, in a strongly worded statement, Global Affairs Minister Marc Garneau condemns what he calls the arbitrary nature of Schellenberg's sentence, saying it's a cruel and inhumane punishment. Garneau adds the push to get clemency for Schellenberg is not over yet. The decision, it still has to go to China's Supreme People's Court for approval. Now, all of this is a tangled diplomatic rift, to say the least, that's only getting rockier as a federal election is expected to be called here at home maybe any day now. Federal Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole weighing in, accusing China of using the death penalty for political purposes and saying Canada should consider boycotting the upcoming Beijing Olympics.
We're proud of our athletes, we're celebrating, but we also have to recognize the actions of a country that wants to host the games to bring people together. And we'll have to think long and hard on whether we reward a country like that with the games.
The Beijing Winter Games are just 6 months away. Melissa Duggan, City News.
The BC Prosecution Service says no further charges will be laid following the police investigation into the legislature spending scandal. After two special prosecutors got the final police report, they concluded that the assessment standard was not met for any charges beyond those that have already been laid. The special prosecutors were appointed in November of 2018 to provide legal advice to the RCMP during the investigation into spending by senior legislature staff on personal expenses. Former Clerk Craig James pleaded not guilty last month to 5 charges, including breach of trust and fraud.
A few moments ago, I informed my caucus colleagues that I will not be seeking re-election as a member of the Manitoba Legislative Assembly, and accordingly, a new leader of the Progressive Conservative Party in Manitoba will lead our party into the next election.
That is Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister announcing he is stepping aside and won't be seeking re-election. The Premier has been facing controversy over comments he made about Canadian history. Last week, he apologized after saying that people who came to Canada before and after it became a country did not come to destroy, but to build. Since then, his Indigenous Relations Minister resigned from cabinet. 2 Indigenous men quit provincial economic development boards, and Indigenous leaders have roundly condemned the Premier. Pallister made the comments today during a caucus retreat in Brandon, Manitoba. Well, you'll soon be able to use your own cup at Starbucks again. Yes, the chain says it's developed a contactless method that will ensure you get your morning fix, but in a safe way. You can start bringing in your commuter cup as of August 24th. Starbucks is also ditching plastic straws in favor of paper ones. The company says the move will save more than 68 million plastic straws from being thrown out. Additional support is on the way for BC farmers impacted by scorching heat waves, hundreds of wildfires, and historic droughts. The feds and the province are teaming up to create and beef up financial response programs for those affected. Farmers and ranchers can apply for the late participation in the Agri-Stability Program, meaning those not yet enrolled for this year can apply until December of 2022. Within a few weeks, they'll see some emergency cash, which has increased from 50% to 75% of the estimated final payment.